Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, here with Byron Lambert. Super excited to be back here with you as we have version 2.0 of the PPR RosterWatch cheat sheet now up at RosterWatch.com. And just coming out of Memorial Day, Byron, you'll notice, not at his general studio location, back in the great state of Texas. Byron, what the hell's going on, brother?
Oh, man, just visiting with the folks for a little bit here, celebrating the old 39th birthday, and met my brand new baby niece for a few minutes the other day. So staying busy, but trying to enjoy some time with everybody after it's been kind of a long run here. We haven't been able to see anybody. So
now you we have Sapperstud in the comments saying something about Mike. I don't know if that's an issue. Let us know if that's an issue with one of our mics or whether what the hell you're trying to say there. Of course, we're streaming here on Periscope and on YouTube. If you're watching there, if you could please give us the thumbs up and leave a comment, we would certainly appreciate that. And make sure to like and subscribe there. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and a review there. We'd be greatly appreciative of that as we tick up over 600, hopefully. We would like that. I think we're at like 596 right now. If we get above 600, I would go to bed tonight feeling super happy. Sappersud's saying no. He said that his boy Mike D signed in. So he's not talking about one of our mics. All right. With that being said, we have version 2.0 of the cheat sheet now up and available. The magical, mythical RosterWatch cheat sheet available to our pro subscribers at RosterWatch.com. I am going to start off the pod by running a simulation because something has happened, Byron, with the Fantasy Pros mock draft wizard that I know many people use. We certainly use it as a big tool as far as testing this thing because you can draft against. Look at this, Byron. Look at what all we have down here. We now have ADPs pulled in from 4 different sites, plus the Fantasy Pros Composite ADP. We have ESPN, we have Fantrax, we have RT Sports, and Fantasy Football Calculator, as well as the best ball average draft position. So that's the best ball FFPC and best ball 10s. We also now, this is new today, the ESPN pre-draft rankings have been pulled in to this as well. So we are going to have to, this guy John Eason says, what's up, Adam and Byron? Okay.
What's up, John?
I figured my name would be easier to remember than yours, Byron. People always call you Byron or Brian. I've never had somebody mix up my name with an Alex and an Adam.
I had somebody call me Trashman in the comments section.
You must have made you feel like shit. I would never want to be referenced as a trash man. All right, but anyway, so a big deal here. We're getting it to where now we not only have the mock draft data here from Fantasy Pros, which really does help a lot, but we also have all these composite ADPs, the composite best ball ADPs, and now the pre-draft rankings at Yahoo and ESPN, the 2 biggest fantasy providers that, when you're in your queue, the dumbasses in your league are going to be relying on that. So having to pull those things in, pretty important whenever we look at an overall picture. I'll just do this first simulation here. I'll randomize my initial draft order to 7th. This will be a PPR snake draft with 12 teams. The starting rosters will have 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and then 2 flex of either a wide receiver, running back, tight end, 6 bench spots. I'm not going to draft a kicker or defense. We'll always just draft those 2 positions with our last 2 picks. And Byron, this could be a disaster because this has changed since the last time that I've run a mock. So maybe this will, if this doesn't go well, it'll give us some things that we can concentrate on with the actual structure. So let's just get to it. We'll start at this mock draft. I'll use the 2.0 test 1. And let's just see what happens here, Byron. You can tell me any thoughts that you have as we sort of go along here. We have we have some comments in the chat. John Ryan saying, "What's up, fellas? Appreciate your work. Helped me get the championship trophy last year. Love to hear it. Love to hear it.
Already getting that thing shined up, buddy.
Yeah. Okay, so this is different. Pick 7, we're going to take Derrick Henry here at the very beginning. Rumblings with some in the fantasy community that Derrick Henry possibly running back 2 in standard leagues with some people's initial ranks. How would you feel about that?
To me, he seems like a guy who's maybe been a little bit undervalued so far in this process this offseason in a peculiar way.
We have generally not gotten a lot of this. So this draft is going to be different, I think, Byron, because I haven't gotten much of Derrick Henry. I haven't gotten much of this guy, Nick Chubb, either. So this could be the ESPN rankings coming in and sort of swindling some of our ADP stuff here. We'll just have to kind of see how it goes. Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, though, certainly not a bad start here. Odell Beckham here with our 3rd pick. This is probably not looking too bad. Chris Carson, a guy who we're going to have to kind of talk about here, whether we like in the mid-4th round quite as much as we talked about previously, just with some of the swirlings going around there with the signings of various players, et cetera, et cetera. We can talk about that later, whether or not we need to kind of bump him back down. But Chris Carson is your running back 3. Certainly don't hate it. It looks like we're going to end up getting Terry. We would have a choice here between like a Terry McLaurin, Stephon Diggs, T.Y. Hilton. I'd actually like to write all those guys down. McLaurin, Diggs, and Hilton, because with what's happened here, I think we need to have a conversation with those guys, because in this situation, I'm not sure I would be taking Terry McLaurin here, even though the sheet is instructing me to do so. Let's see what we get next. It looks like we're going to be able to get Cam Akers as our number 4 running back here, which just feels like an absolute steal at this point. And we will get our number 3 wide receiver as just continuing to – we're getting so much Will Fuller. So much Will Fuller. When you can get him here in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, the mid-7th round, it does feel incredibly good to get him there. And we're backfilling – the sheet is helping us with backfilling some of these wide receivers, because we're going to end up getting Darius Slayton here. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like Keyshawn Vaughn is going to continue following to us here in the 8th round, and that's unfortunate. We made a promise to ourselves, Byron. We remember we were not going to get too high on that guy. That's another guy I'd like to just write down and see where you're exactly comfortable with, because that's changed. This is great to get Deontay Johnson here at where was that? Was that the 9th, end of the 9th round, or kind of mid-end 9th round? I mean, you're hearing people start to talk about him like he is I mean, there's some bold takes out there with people talking about that they like Deontay Johnson next year better than Juju Smith-Schuster. Deontay Johnson earlier this week telling reporters that he was injured starting in week 2 of last season. Looks like we're going to take a flyer here on CeeDee Lamb. Not getting a lot of him, but this is just – I guess this is just what happens whenever these drafts have sort of changed up here a little bit. Preston Williams. Look at this. This is interesting. Austin Hooper falls here at the very end, and I don't like Austin Hooper. We've not been getting that much of him. We have a choice, though, between him and Aaron Rodgers. Would you rather just take the quarterback here, or would you think that Rodgers might fall, and if we don't get him, we at least get some other kind of, Carson Wentz or, Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford, something like that?
I'd consider passing on both, but if it's between those two, I'd probably take Rodgers.
I think I'm going to take Hooper and just see what we get left with it. Because if we do that, we can just get Carson Wentz here. I'm fine with that. And then just take a flyer here at the very last pick and go with Mr. N'Keal Harry. So that team, it looks like with the ESPN stuff getting pulled in, there could be some of those mid-round running backs might need to get pulled up a little bit. Some running backs in the area of Odell Beckham and DJ Moore might need to get sort of pulled up a little bit, because while I love the 4 running backs that I have, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Chris Carson, Cam Akers, I don't want to be I feel like with these teams, the structure of these teams, we need 5 running backs for this structure. We didn't end up getting it, so that's just going to require more testing. Like we always say, the sheet is a living, breathing document. We continue to work on it. Now that we have ESPN pre-draft rankings being pulled in, that's obviously thrown a small bit of a wrench and a little bit of the structure in those parts that we've mentioned. I want to get back to those parts. But before we do, I know that you were doing simulations. You've been taking some notes. Let's get to some of your thoughts, concerns, ideas. And then I can kind of get back to you about my 2 specific questions that I made note of just during that simulation.
Well, I mean, first things first, I think that's a pretty nice haul in that simulation.
That squad. Yeah, I do too. Let's just read it over again, because that people might not. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, Carson. So the running backs are Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Chris Carson, Cam Akers. The wide receivers are Odell Beckham, Terry McLaurin, Will Fuller, Darius Slayton, Deontay Johnson, CeeDee Lamb, Preston Williams, N'Keal Harry. The tight end is Austin Hooper. The quarterback is Carson Wentz. The structure of this sheet with the addition of the ESPN pre-draft rankings needs to bump a few of these running backs up in the Odell Beckham area of the sheet, and also in the Derrick. Like we need to get like guys like Keyshawn Vaughn or some of these guys who are these values that we were taking. Darius Geis needs to come up to where Darius Slayton is. I would have liked to have taken Darius Geis instead of Darius Slayton. That would have made I could actually go back and do that if I wanted.
You say that because we've touched on so many guys here that I wanted to talk about today just in the course of this one simulation. I actually think Geis currently might be a guy that we're a little bit too high on, and then I look at this, Alex. If you start pushing all those running backs up, it appears to me like we would have come away fairly thin at wide receiver unless you plan on pushing wide receivers up at other junctures in the draft. Now, to me, the only area here where I would have tried to exercise some personal discretion is since you had Chubb already, I think with Beckham on the in the queue, I probably would have just pivoted to the next wide receiver on the list behind Beckham.
That's another thing. I'm sorry. I just had another thought I was going to ask you, but
to kind of divvy things up there so I don't have too much exposure to Cleveland. And, of course, I think the same thing could have applied to Hooper there a little bit later, Alex. But as you mentioned, I've been running some simulations and just taking some general notes. Today I wanted to get to some tight end talk and some value wide receiver talk. Like I mentioned, fortunately, a lot of these players just came into discussion right here in this simulation to open the podcast. So I think first things first, a little bit of house cleaning. Let's begin, Alex. You teased it. I mean, how much does the signing of Carlos Hyde affect Chris Carson? I mean, Carlos Hyde is returning from a torn labrum. Reports are that he should be ready, by the early portion of the season. So I guess my question is, especially in the PPR format, since this is the PPR cheat sheet, Alex, is the signing of Carlos Hyde enough to slide Le'Veon Bell ahead of him, given how much hype Le'Veon and lip service Le'Veon's been giving to the Jets' new interior offensive line recently? In addition to the signing of Hyde in Seattle,
Becton.
and exactly,
Becton.
and just in the PPR format here, just
Yes.
Also with the idea that we've started to get more bullish on the Seahawks wide receivers versus ADP tells me that we don't want to get too low on Carson, but tells me we should consider sliding Le'Veon over Chris Carson at this point.
Yes, we should. Absolutely. I'm gonna start the 2.1 update right now because there are some changes that I need to make. And when I do that, we're gonna move Le'Veon. The only question is, it made me feel like shit just there to take Chris Carson. So we're gonna get him down. Would you rather have what would you do if the decision came down to Le'Veon Bell, AJ Brown, or Patrick Mahomes? Does that seem sensible?
Yeah, I would take Bell or Mahomes. A reminder, too, since we're talking about the PPR sheet here, Alex, Le'Veon Bell in 15 games played last year, 78 receptions. We've got to remember that so much of the Jets' season was derailed by Darnold missing the first portion of the season with the mono, and then the offensive line was bad. I really do think we might get the bounce on these Jets, specifically Le'Veon Bell, a little bit this year. So I think when we're talking PPR, this is a sound strategic move to go ahead and push him up over Chris Carson with this news of the recent signing of Carlos Hyde there in Seattle.
All right. Yeah. That makes sense. And also it's not just Carlos Hyde, right? What bothers us about Carlos Hyde being signed is what the team is telling us about what they feel about the health of Chris Carson and Rashad Penny. I'm not necessarily worried about I probably am a little bit worried about just the body, the man, Carlos Hyde, him taking a little bit of work away. What's most concerning to me about Carlos Hyde signing, though, is the fact that they likely would not have done that if there wasn't some shred of concern about the depth that they're going to have at running back. And if there's concern about the depth they're going to have at running back, that doesn't bode well for dude coming off, what was it, a hip injury that he had? Chris Carson? Was it a hip?
I don't know. I think that's more a reflection of the situation with Penny, but we saw at the end of the year they want a little bit of a committee. I mean, Penny started to get some action there before he got hurt. If Hyde is the guy that he was last year, I mean, I think the Seahawks have every intention as the season progresses to get both those guys involved. So Carson would still be the lead guy. Now, I think you can make the argument Carson comes out of the gate hot and fast early in the season. We like fast starters. That said, we're not going to get too low on Chris Carson. You get him as RB3 in these simulations. That's just fine. I just think when we're talking PPR, we're talking about 78
you want Le'Veon
on the season last year. It's time to slide Le'Veon Bell up just a hair.
He should have been all along. He should have been all along. And as long as we're just talking about that part of the sheet, I didn't like taking Odell Beckham there over DJ Moore. Do you think DJ Moore should be ranked ahead of Odell Beckham straight up?
Not sure, man. I'd probably still take Odell there, given if I hadn't already drafted Nick Chubb. I would have been just fine sliding to Moore if that was since I'd already had Chubb, I want to make a little executive decision there, not to have too much exposure to the Browns. I worry a little bit about DJ Moore with Bridgewater and Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel. McCaffrey soaks up a lot of targets. I don't know. I think putting Robbie Anderson in that mix muddies the water a little bit for DJ Moore.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, and it is Odell Beckham.
And you're still worried about a slow recovery. We'll talk about Jarvis a little bit later, but I know you're still worried a little bit about a slow recovery there for Jarvis. To me, that points to potential early season, prosperous start for Odell Beckham in Cleveland. I mentioned I had a little bit of tight end talk I wanted to get to today, Alex, specifically maybe kind of like mid-round and value tight end talk. So, I mean, let's begin. How confident are you in Hunter Henry this season, Alex? He's never played a full season. He missed all of 2018. Now we've got Tyrod Taylor and a highly drafted rookie quarterback who's almost, certain to see some action this year at the helm there at the quarterback situation with the Chargers. I mean, truly, how confident are you in Hunter Henry this year?
I'm not confident in anybody on the Chargers. I'm not even that confident in Austin Eckler. I'm not confident in any of them. I don't think I've gotten a single Charger in any simulation that I've done all this whole time. Have you ever gotten a Charger? I've maybe got Mike Williams once or twice in like the 10th round.
Which I'm looking forward to speaking about that maybe a little bit later. I actually don't hate that super late. I haven't gotten many Chargers. I still like Eckler, and that's just going to depend on his ADP. But yeah, I'm very cool. I'm tepid on Hunter Henry. That's not a tight end I'm really that interested in going kind of mid round in on. I don't feel like that's a
I don't either.
Pick
I don't either. All right, so I mean, I don't need to move any of these other guys up. But in that same tier, I'm just going to move Hunter Henry to the bottom, and we can just, because we've been getting plenty, if it gets to, let's say it gets to round 7, round 8 turn, right? We can then, if we're looking at the wide receivers, if Deontay Johnson is off the board, and if maybe. Around the time CeeDee Lamb starts going off the board like we took earlier, if there is an Evan Ingram, a Tyler Higbee around that spot, we've been getting them. Whereas where we had Hunter Henry ranked or placed on the sheet in relation to those guys, we never got Hunter Henry anyway. So I don't think we need to bump those dudes up. But I certainly like around, if Evan Ingram, Tyler Higbee falls around the 7-8 turn, if Rob Gronkowski and Jared Cook keep falling to like the 8-9 turn, which
those are the two guys I actually kind of may prefer at value there. So this is a great segue, Alex. And you mentioned him. How worried are we that Tyler Higbee's big run occurred last year with Gerald Everett on the sidelines, who's now back in the fold for at least one more season. And Gerald Everett had 3 double-digit target games himself last year, where he went on a bit of a tear weeks 4 through 7. We're hearing that with Brandon in the post-Brandon Cooks era, there's going to be more 12 personnel with the Rams this season. Higbee was 11 targets per game in weeks 13 through 17 last year to finish the season. It was a 5-week span of double-digit fantasy scoring. But
where he looked like the best tight end in the league for a while. He looked like the new Gronk.
Type, right? Yeah. But to be fair, Gerald Everett basically missed all of the games during that stretch, with the exception of registering 1 target in week 16 versus San Francisco in a game where Higbee still had pretty nice production. So I guess the question is, can Tyler Higbee flourish while these two tight ends coexist in Los Angeles? Are we confident that Gerald Everett takes a back seat this year? I'm not so sure with all the rumblings of the 12 personnel and down Brandon Cooks. The McVay didn't give us quite the endorsement at the combine that we would have liked to have had in terms of Higbee being in that Travis Kelce, elite echelon. So I guess, the more I think about it, I might like Higbee a little bit more in dynasty, where Everett is a free agent this coming off season and where the team will have an out on Higbee, but he'll still be under contract. I just think there's a really important dynasty tight end situation to monitor. And it just raises the question for me. I mean, how worried are we that Tyler Higbee's big fantasy tear occurred last year with Gerald Everett sidelined, who appears to be healthy, and with all the talk of 12 personnel being the heavy, the favorite package there in Los Angeles this year, Alex?
Well, just let me hand it back to you. You're the pricing king. So what percentage likelihood do you place on the idea that Tyler Higbee could be, maybe 80 to 85% of Tyler Higbee could basically be what he was? I don't think it would be sustainable for him to go a whole season being as good as he was to end last year. I'm not sure that he's one of the most talented tight ends in the league, right? But maybe something close to it, right? If he could be something close to that, what is your percentage chance that you think that he could have a season like that, barring injury? Is it a 25%er?
No.
30%er?
No,
50?
50, and I'd say a solid 50%er.
If you're telling me I have a 50% chance of getting a Travis Kelce or a George Kittle at the 7-8 turn, we need to keep fucking trying to get Tyler Higbee as much as we can.
Well, to your point, I mean, the more I analyze it, I just thought to myself, you're not sure, and there's definitely concerns, but I think Tyler Higbee's just one of those guys you're going to have to take the risk on this year.
I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it for multiple weeks in a row where he was winning people DFS tournaments. He was helping win people fantasy championships, especially in tight end premium. I mean, I've seen it. He can do it. The fans have seen it. The coaches have seen it. It isn't like I'm betting completely on the come here. So if we think it's a 50-50 shot that he could be like that again, yeah, dude, round 8, yeah, dude, we should be more aggressive on the guy.
Well, I think you need to make sure you're getting him at value, but if that opportunity presents itself, I do believe you'll have to take your chances with Tyler Higbee at that point. So,
yeah,
maybe cooled a little bit, but still very, very interested. Okay, next guy on the list here, Alex, Mike Gesicki down in Miami, 7+ targets per game, basically down the stretch last year. Seems like he's pretty high on like that lower tier of tight ends on the sheet. And we're getting Fitzpatrick back. We may have rookie quarterback action this year. We had the viral social media video from Gesicki here this last week of an insane theatrical catch he made there in his own driveway at home. How do you feel about Mike Gesicki coming off, again, a stretch at the end of the season last year, whereas he was a 7+ target per game guy? Can we believe in Mike Gesicki in that weird situation in Miami?
Sure. Well, it's just like these other guys, man. Like you look at the tight end position, and you have Kelce, you have Kittle from last year, that you can project moving forward, feeling totally safe with. Austin Hooper, who was sort of right there with them last year, you can't feel as safe with because he's in an all-new situation now that he's in Cleveland and out of Atlanta. Zach Ertz feels like Zach Ertz is in such an awkward place ADP-wise to where I will never take Zach Ertz. I worry too much about Dallas Goedert. I worry too much about the fact that volume might not continue to be there for him with the new pass catchers that they've added, with Miles Sanders' role growing there as a pass catcher out of the backfield, et cetera, et cetera. And then besides Darren Waller, and maybe to some degree Evan Ingram, you forget, since he only played 8 games last year, but you forget he was basically about a 14-point per game guy, right, in PPR. So outside of those guys, I mentioned Mark Andrews, right? Did I mention Mark Andrews?
I don't think you did. Okay. Make sure you're still pretty interested in Mark Andrews. Yeah.
So basically, if you don't get one of those top 6 to 7, I honestly think that, when you start looking at these other guys like the Hunter Henrys, the Jared Cooks, the Tyler Higbees, guys that could come on in better situations this year. Guys like maybe clearly a guy like Gronkowski, clearly a guy like Jonnu Smith, Noah Fant. Some of the I honestly think that Mike Gesicki might have the profile of a guy that I'm more interested in than a lot of those guys, besides maybe Tyler Higbee, especially with where we're getting him right now. I'm getting him in simulations a ton. And let me look at where he is on the cheat sheet. He is priced in to be taken. I don't know it off the top of my head. Hold on. He's priced in to be taken. Gesicki. Pick 120. Pick 10.08 or something in a 12-team league. 10.08. That's late. You only have 3 more picks left before you take a kicker in a defense.
I think he's a super interesting, a conversation point in this draft, because it's kind of a, how excited can you be about buying into the Dolphins offense, really, behind maybe
Gesicki is explosive, man.
Yeah, and on the other hand, that's pretty big news. Seven targets a game down the stretch last year. I think that was Preston Williams, was down a little bit because of the knee injury there towards the end, but that's a pretty big run on Gesicki. So another guy that, obviously question marks, but I think that's a fairly calculated risk you can take at tight end that has some upside a little bit later. Now, I'll tell you, Alex, you mentioned him.
But people should just know why we like Mike Gesicki. He's 6'6", 250 pounds, and he runs a 4.5 40, and he's got a 99th percentile. So here I'll pull up a player profiler. Okay. 96th percentile 40, a 95th percentile speed score, a 99th percentile burst score, 99th percentile agility score, and 100th percentile catch radius, along with a young breakout age.
I believe we scouted Gesicki didn't we see him in Mobile?
Was he at the Senior Bowl, or was it somebody, Mike Gesicki? If he was, he probably didn't.
We liked him just generally as a prospect.
I remember we talked about him.
That was a thin tight end class.
Gesicki, number 8. Yeah. Number 88 at the Senior Bowl that year.
So he had a good Senior Bowl too. That's why he's been on our radar for a while. Now you mentioned him, Alex.
Is Gesicki, was that the 2018 Senior Bowl? Let me look. I just saw a photo of him.
17 or 18.
It was a 2017 season, 2018 Senior Bowl. Okay. Yeah.
Another tight end you mentioned, Alex. You know that I'm one of the industry's biggest fans just in terms of talent, and I was even had an eye on him last year as a rookie. That's Noah Fant there in Denver. But my question to you is, he was basically a 3 target per game guy last season, and now we've got Hamler, Judy, all these other folks coming into the mix there in Denver. I know we're expecting a leap for Drew Lock, but don't you think maybe Noah Fant should come down a little bit? 3 targets per game last season.
Yeah, where do if Noah Fant is up higher than you think he should be, Byron, I feel the same way as you do, and I probably hate him even more than you, because I didn't like him as a prospect as much as even you did, and I certainly don't like the situation there. And Denver, what I like about Denver is the fact that they've surrounded Drew Lock with all these great weapons, right? So I like Drew Lock, but it's just a situation where I'm not necessarily interested in buying into any of those weapons just by themselves. It's like a la carte pieces. I'd rather just get them all with Drew Lock. And here's the other thing that, Albert O is, I mean, he'll already have a built-in rapport with Drew Lock whenever he comes in. That's a really talk about athletic specimens at the tight end position when we just talked about Mike Gesicki. Albert O out of Missouri, Drew Lock's old teammate, that guy, his speed scores and his agility and burst scores and everything like that are just as good as Mike Gesicki's. He's that same kind of athlete. So it isn't only Hamler and Judy and the fact that Cortland Sutton's still there and the fact that Drew Lock could still suck. I mean, it's the fact that also you got another guy coming into that tight end room who's athletic and who's good. So if I rarely get Noah Fant. If it'll make you feel better to get him down, I can get him. I can move him down. I don't give a shit. Like we're not getting any of them, so I'll just move him down.
I think you bake all that in. 3 targets a game last year, and you got to pull the plug on Noah Fant.
That's fine
at this point of the draft season. I'll tell you what, Alex. I got a few more tight ends
in this situation. All right, so in this same tier, are you going to talk about TJ Hockenson at all?
Of course, you know I always talk about TJ Hockenson.
Okay, well then I'll just ask you whenever you bring.
No podcast is complete without me pounding the table for TJ Hockenson. So,
and that's one of the reasons I didn't like Noah Fant that much is because I said, dude, I just said if there are 2 of these tight ends coming from this school, like
you want all the Hockenson.
Just give me Hawk. I mean, Hawkins. I thought Hockenson was so much better, and maybe that was just sort of the reason why
he was just
artificially sort of deflated my opinion.
A big play guy, but he was just even a nasty blocker, just a better prototypical. Seriously, TJ Hockenson, the best tight end prospect that we've ever evaluated coming out since we've been doing this. Yeah, right. I mean, that's been a long time.
Here's the thing: is like you got to remind yourself of those things. You got to put a pin in that and remember that the next year and stuff like that. Like those are things you can't let yourself forget. Because especially the tight end position, we've just seen the development there at that position. We've been talking about this ever since we started local radio in Austin, Texas, and in Central Texas, and then eventually after we got syndicated and then on to Sirius. It's like we've been saying it the whole time. We've been saying this for 11 years. When you're a tight end, you have to learn in the quarterback room. You have to learn in the tight end room. You have to learn in the wide receiver room, and you need to learn the calls from the offensive line in the offensive line room. It's a lot to take in. It's probably the hardest position to take in on offense outside of the quarterback for a rookie. So we just got to keep reminding ourselves when we give these tight ends good evaluations. We did it with Gesicki. We did it with TJ Hockenson. It's why these are players that we will be focused on now as they could possibly be coming into their own. And even though with Hockenson, we're only talking about year 2, he's the kind of prospect where, I mean, we saw enough in one game out of Hockenson last year versus Arizona to say that, he's the kind of prospect that can kind of bend that curve a little bit and be able to be ready in more of a 2-year timetable than a 3 to 4 year timetable that we would usually expect.
Yeah. And it's easy to forget. We'll probably maybe get to this in the next podcast that all those arrows in Detroit start pointing back to Matthew Stafford, who, like I said, easy to forget. I think in 6 out of his 8 games he played last year, he was a top 6 fantasy quarterback. So, if you jog your memory on that, you think about how good of a prospect Hockenson is. Look, I mean, we're talking about Hockenson. Let me just finish. I mean, I ran a poll on Twitter yesterday about TJ Hawkinson's prospects for the 2020 season. 10% folks voted that he would be a top 5 tight end in 2020. 65%,
in fantasy?
Yeah, well, that's what was implied. 65% of the vote went to TJ Hockenson as a top 10 tight end in 2020. And then a 25% of the vote went to TJ Hockenson as a bust. So I think you bake all that in. You have tight end 18 on the sheet who, is really shaping up to be, more than likely, at least the sentiment industry wide, a top 12 tight end with that mega top 5 upside.
Okay, well, I think we can end the show there, but between us, it's like the only reason is that here's who I need to get him above. I need to get him above. Does he belong above Gesicki? Just the ADPs aren't. Let me just pull up Fantasy Pros real quick. So the show's over for the pod, but this is what you get on YouTube. It's this extra bullshit with Byron and I here talking this out. Let's see. I just want to pull up. I just want to look at the consensus ADP on Fant. Do you have Fantasy Pros pulled up?
I don't.
Just with the ADP. All right, hold on. NFL ADP consensus for PPR. I'd like to see why I have them stacked up like this, because it just feels like Hockenson's current. So he's 18 on the sheet. Yeah, so we need to move him up. Gesicki's still ahead of him. We're going to get Fant below both of them. That way we can end up with both of these guys. So we're going to get him up. We should not get him above Gesicki, though, right?
Not now. I think by August we probably will be, as the ADPs change. I have a few more of these value tight end notes I want to get off my chest. Do you want to do them here in the after show, Alex, or you want me to save them for next week?
You can talk about them if you like. Hold on, let me just get this. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be a bad host here. I just want to make sure I get this shit straight. So, all those. Oh, Haydenhurst. Haydenhurst needs to come down here to this kind of Blake Jarwin area. So like this and this. You don't have any interest in Austin Hooper, do you?
Well, that's one of the guys I wanted to get to here. I'll just go ahead and read this off. Austin Hooper, an interesting guy with David Njoku still in the fold after going on a tear last year in Atlanta. Really two pretty good seasons in a row for Austin Hooper in 2018 and 2019. Now in Cleveland, coming almost off of 100 targets almost in 13 games last year in Atlanta, 75 receptions for 787 yards and 6 touchdowns, 7.5 targets per game. All big numbers for Austin Hooper last year. I mean, he was basically a top 5 guy there for big swaths of the season. But, my concern, Alex, is Cleveland Browns only 69 total tight end targets last season. David Njoku,
and they have a good tight end. Yeah.
Yeah, how puzzling is the situation with Austin Hooper? I mean, that was a priority free agent signing. He's shown his stripes as a very good option the last couple of years. But look, Baker Mayfield's not Matt Ryan. They didn't have a history last year of throwing it to the tight ends. Not that they had good tight ends to really throw to. And then you got Njoku still in the mix. I just think Hooper is, depending on his ADP, could easily fade this year, Alex.
And they drafted Harrison Bryant.
Yeah.
No, thank you, man. I don't want it. Like Austin Hooper's. We're not getting that. It's like I can't believe that we got him in that, or we had the opportunity to get him in that one simulation. So we'll have to keep testing it. We have Mike Gesicki. We have TJ Hockenson now in a tier sort of their own above the Hayden Hurst and the Austin Hoopers and the Jonnu Smiths, the Blake Jarwins, the Noah Fants, the Ian Thomases, et cetera.
Just you mentioned him, Alex. Just two more quick notes for you here. Doesn't Blake Jarwin feel like this year's Darren Waller in terms of the preseason hype, kind of like last year it was for Waller? Is that the feeling you get about Jarwin?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that was something you really needed to pay attention to last year. Not to say that's indicative of what'll happen this season. I don't. You asked me because of the hype. I don't think that the hype lines up with part of the reason that we got a lot of Darren Waller last year is because we hated the idea of Tyrell Williams being the number one option in that receiving game. Whereas for the Cowboys, we have not only Amari Cooper, but we have Michael Gallup, and holy shit, now we have CeeDee Lamb, who's better than both those guys. And Mike McCarthy, maybe not with a massive history of elite tight end production.
I think Blake Jarwin is fine to take. I think he's fine. In tight end premium, I got him in a tight end premium dynasty league. The other day is my second tight end. I felt really good about it. But I think, look, I might even feel more I'm more comfortable with Blake Jarwin than I am with Austin Hooper. As weird as that is to say, Austin Hooper was like tight end 3 on the season last season. But like you talked about, man, the Cleveland situation is hard to trust. It's hard. It's really hard to trust.
Which is why I think at that point, I strongly consider pivoting to Hayden Hurst, who, I mean, it's basically a top 5 fantasy tight end situation that was vacated by Austin Hooper, and Hayden Hurst has that thing all to himself, Alex, in Atlanta.
Yep. So that's what I'm doing. I think that we're going to – so basically here's what we do is I took that tier of tight ends, and I have now just shifted these tiers to where Mike Gesicki, TJ Hockenson, Hayden Hurst, and Blake Jarwin, if we're having to wait on value, will be 4 that we're hyper-focused in the very, very late portions of our drafts. All right, so that should do it. Thanks, everybody, for watching on YouTube. If you hung around this long, man, please give us a thumbs up on the video if you could. If you could leave comments underneath, make sure you're subscribed. We really, really appreciate it. Of course, the cheat sheet you can find at RosterWatch.com. And as long as I am here, I might as well tell you the 2020 RosterWatch cheat sheet is available now at RosterWatch.com. And expert quality draft is guaranteed. The RosterWatch cheat sheet only at RosterWatch.com. All right, guys, we love y'all. I'll be back here tomorrow with the Trash Man. For Byron, I am Alex. We will see you guys